Hello, I'm James Henry, and this is The Message.
The Message.
If you look for it, love actually is all around. It is the very fabric of what connects us to each other. You know, it is that peace of our lives without which our lives lose meaning. That sense of connection. Love is that kind of, you can't even really, I looked for definitions online. I even went to the Urban Dictionary because that's the worst place you can possibly go. I'm not suggesting this is yet another moment. Don't go online, look at the Urban Dictionary. But I just want you to know, the top definition on the Urban Dictionary is a trick God played on us so that we will reproduce. I just think that's really a kind of a cruddy, a trick God played on us so we'll I just don't even get that one. But it's apparently the most popular definition on the Urban Dictionary. There were all sorts of other ones that were in there, and trying to figure out what love is as challenging perhaps as any other abstract concept. And I think the problem with it is that love is never meant to be an abstract concept. It's not just supposed to be something that's in your head or even that warm, fuzzy feeling in your heart. It's something you do. It's that moment when you reach your hand out to somebody else and hope that they'll take it. That's when you walk up to someone you haven't seen in a long time and you're not sure where your relationship is, and you open your arms wide and hope that there's a hug waiting on the other end and that you're not going to look like an idiot like this. You know, I never, even if somebody doesn't hug me back when I do this, I'm practicing a sermon. This is what I'm doing. I'm just practicing a sermon. This was a liturgical gesture they taught me in seminary. So is this one. All important, I was just practicing my gestures, making sure my arms still move, whatever, because I'm embarrassed that, you hope. But love is something you demonstrate. Love is something that you can see. It's called a fruit of the Spirit because you can see it. Have you ever noticed that all of the plants in the world that produce fruit, it's something you see? Look at an apple tree. What do you see? When it's apple time, the apples are there. If it's a fruit, it appears there, and you know what it is. You don't have to define it. Tomatoes, they're a fruit used as a vegetable. You don't have to define it. You see it. You know it. You experience it. When you see love, you know it. When you don't see it, you know that too. When it's missing, when that piece of what makes us who we are is gone, we know that too. Every group that has ever sung a song in solo artists that sings at least one song that's about love. I want to know what love is. I want you to show me. That's it. I want you to show me. Because, one of the things I think that love is about is a story. We got to get beyond the definitions to the story itself. Until you've experienced love, I don't think you're particularly good at giving love away to somebody else. It's because infants are held and coddled, and when they are hungry, are fed, because when they are thirsty, they're drunk or whatever. When they make a mess in their diapers, if you will, they're changed. When they just want to be held, they're picked up. It's then that we begin to get the sense of what love looks like. And if you never get held as an infant, for the rest of your life, it changes the way that you are. Detachment disorder is something that's diagnosable, something that a person never quite attaches to somebody else because they weren't held in that infant time in their lives. I can still remember when Hannah was little, and she was my first child. I was always afraid I was going to break her, but apparently I didn't. She's 21 and doing fine, apparently. So I didn't evidently break her, but I was always concerned. So Linda decided she was going to give me a teaching lesson about whether she'd break her or not. And she had an allergic reaction that put her in the hospital for 2 days, and it was me and Hannah. What? Honey, I was trying to make it sound better than it was. Hannah and I were alone together for that period of time. And of course, the first day Linda goes in the hospital is the day that I have charge conference that night. And so my district superintendent hears Linda's in the hospital suddenly, and he says, James, just come, be here, say whatever you want to say with Hannah, and we'll call it quits. And just hand me the reports later. I don't even care. And that's the way that it was. That was a kind of love. But you hold that baby all the time, and you can't break them by holding them too much. Linda's mom always used to say, you hold that baby too much. And I said, she's not your baby. I'll hold my baby as much as I want to. Yes, I sure as heck did. I can do this. I will hold that baby as much as... You're going to spoil her. You cannot spoil a person with love. You can spoil a person with stuff. You can give them way too many iPhones and iPads and televisions and telephones and toys to play with. You can do that. That's spoiling. You can never spoil a person with love. With hugging them and holding them. And let me just tell you something. Don't miss out on the chance to hold them when they're infants. This is just a heads up. Because when they get to be 21, they will not let you pick them up anymore. I tried. I said, Hannah, come over here. I'm going to sit in my chair, and I want you to lay across my arm like that. She said, Dad, I'll break your arm. I said, no. She said, I'm not doing it. Okay. That's all right. We used to fit together in one chair. Now we don't. Now we don't because we're both adults. The truth is, you can't ruin somebody with love. You can't spoil someone with love. You can't break somebody with love. All you can do is let that person be who they are. Because covered in a blanket of love, that's when we learn that it's safe to try to figure out who we are. Just imagine if someone had always just told you you're loved just like you are since the time you were born. And do whatever you want to do. You know, if you want to be an actor, yeah, try that. Probably going to fail. We've seen you in the house. But give it a shot if that's what you want to do. We love you, and we're going to always be there to catch you when you fall, at least until we can't anymore. We're always going to love you. Imagine being covered by a blanket of love that allows you to try and test and push the limits and the bounds of all that you are. That's what love is. And it's all around you. Over and over again, and I think you can't hear it too many times, that you are loved just like you are. That's why I say it all the time up here. You may get tired of hearing it, but I'm not going to get tired of saying it. Because just the way you are right now, God loves you. Nothing you can do about it. Do you remember that line? I used to use that on my daughter. She used to tell me when we were having our tough years, in her teenage years, I hate you, Dad. And I said, I love you, and there's nothing you can do about it. And then I had the evil laugh, which ruined the whole thing. I didn't really use the evil laugh. But the truth is, God loves you, and there's nothing you can do about it. There's nothing you can do to break that love. Oh, yeah, you can disappoint God. God may not like some of the things that you do, but God will never stop loving you. Never. God loves you already right where you are. The truth is, I also believe that God loves you too much to leave you there as well. God hopes that you'll be transformed and that love, and that's the purpose of love. When you experience love, when you see it demonstrated, when you feel it in your life, it changes you. So imagine if it's a fruit of the Spirit and you get it. Every one of us can grow into love. What are you supposed to do with fruit? Well, you're supposed to eat it, but you're supposed to give it away. It's for some other purpose. What would it look like if you demonstrated love in your everyday life? Now, Linda and I had this ongoing debate. I don't normally do this, but Linda was sitting in her chair this morning. I had just finished my time with God, journaling. I was ready for this sermon. And I came up and I said, Linda, love isn't abstract. It's not a definition. It's a story. And so you have to have people in your story. And then Linda said, wait a second, hold on. And then suddenly she stretched my whole understanding. What about strangers, James? They're not a part of your story yet. How do you deal with strangers? How can you love strangers? Well, one of my first answers was, in my mind, I don't know if you can really love strangers. You can interact with strangers until perhaps they're not strangers anymore, and then there's love. I don't know, because love is messy. This is another problem with all fruit is messy. Have you ever tried cutting that fruit up, ripe, delicious fruit, splats everywhere, at least if you're me and you're using a dull knife. It just is a mess. And love is just that kind of mess. Now, I did find a definition that might be helpful to you. So I'm going to play it for you, and you're going to see if it works for you. Love is an accurate estimate and now I have to look it up. This is always sad, and I have to try to read my own writing, which is impossible. Love is the accurate estimate and the adequate supply of another person's needs. The assessment and the supply of someone else's needs. Now, I think that's a great definition, but I think it's too limited. But if it helps you, I think it's a way you can break it down in your mind. I think most of us are pretty bad sometimes at estimating what somebody else needs. That's where the problem breaks down. What does somebody else need? Well, he's really stumbling in this sermon, so what I'm going to do is shout out to him, "You're a mess up, James!" Yeah, that'll really help me. First of all, it'll get you dragged out. I've got several friends in here. You'll get dragged right out, baby. Right out that door. Then I'll know I'm loved. See? The adequate estimate is when you have to know something about somebody else. And the adequate supply. So, for instance, when somebody says to me, "I'm hungry and I need some food," the loving response is to give them some food. I don't know how much they need, so I probably should try to give them a little bit more than they need, whatever that is. If somebody needs a hug, now I can supply those endlessly, but you have to initiate them. Remember, I've got that rule in my world, ethically, that's a power game. I'm more powerful than you are, apparently, in our relationship because I'm your pastor, so I'm not going to hug you unless I have permission or you start it. So if you ever want a hug from me, you got to come towards me, or I've got to see you crying really out of control, and I have to ask you, is it okay if I hug you? And then if you say yes, I will. If you don't say anything, you have to nod your head. You have to signal that you need a hug. A hug you can give away. Somebody, maybe that's all you need. Maybe that's all you need, and you need a really good, strong hug that's going to just wrap you up, not that's going to break your ribs. Joshua is at that place in his adulthood now, at 18, where he's super strong. He works out away at college, and he likes to prove to me every time he hugs me that he could, if he wanted to, completely squeeze the life out of me. And he does. I love that about him, except when I can't breathe. But he's trying to show that, so can you estimate what somebody else needs? Can you ask them? If you can't estimate it on your own, maybe the question is, what can I do for you? What do I need? That's a simple suggestion. If love is in part about meeting someone's needs, you got to find out what they need first. Oftentimes we assume we know what somebody else needs. This is part of the problem with love. We assume we know what somebody else's needs, and so we give it to them. It's Valentine's Day. I assume my wife needs Godiva truffles, and I give them to her, and she eats them. Over time, one at a time. She's very disciplined in a way that I eat a box at a time. It's a gateway drug for me. First truffle, 12 truffles, they're gone. So for me, I only buy one truffle at a time. I've eaten it, the gateway drug, I don't have any more. But I assume that for Valentine's Day, she needs those truffles. For years, I assumed that she needed milk chocolate truffles because I thought that's what she liked. And then her taste changed, and she likes dark chocolate truffles. I didn't know that, so I was missupplying her needs. Do you see how bad that can be? It can end your life together as a couple when you supply the wrong stuff to the person that you need. So eventually she told me, "James, I really like the dark chocolate ones." What did I do immediately? I went out and got the dark chocolate ones and ate the milk chocolate ones. So I helped her out. I met her needs. I met her needs. And that isn't that kind of the essence of what love is, in a way, meeting one another's needs. Some of them are needs we can't speak out loud. We can't really say them because we don't know what they are. Have you ever just knew that in that moment, you just needed a hug? You were so desperate need of a hug, and you were just among strangers that you almost wanted to walk up to the salesperson and say, you know, this is weird, but could you give me a hug? No, but I can have the store manager escort you out of the building. Yeah. There are probably certain people you should get, your love needs from, and probably others you shouldn't, but that's a side issue. Love is a fruit of the Spirit that is meant to be manifest in all of you. That means finding out what the world needs. And not going back to the 70s song, what the world needs now is love, sweet love. That's the only thing. That there's just too little love, what the world... Okay, if you don't know that song, most of you don't because it was before your time. Some of you do. Me included. That's what the world needs. The world needs love. Stop worrying about measuring how much hate and greed and brokenness there is in the world. Because you know what? If you measure it, you're just not even going to try. Can you be honest with me? If something looks like a mountain, they have those wonderful adages and sayings you've heard way too many times. The best way to move a mountain is one rock at a time, or chipping away at it. The beginning of a 1,000-mile journey is the first step, all that kind of stuff. And it sounds really cool. But if it's 1,000 miles, the first step is just impossible to make. But don't think about the 1,000 miles, think about the step. Right now, right where you are, what can you do? The next person you encounter, you don't have to walk up to them and assume the first thing is they must need a hug. Let me ask you, do you need a hug? Who are you? I'm just a giant because I needed the spices for my wife. She'll give me a hug. Goodbye. Look around you. The people you work with. Maybe just ask them when you see them in the morning, how are you doing? And wait long enough to hear the answer. The perfunctory, fine, okay, fine, we're not going to go any deeper. Usually when somebody says fine, some of you experience this when you've talked to me, fine, really? Really? Are you really fine? Is everything really okay? If I sense that you're not, I will ask that question. I'll push deeper. But not everybody wants to push deeper. My time is defined by you most of the time. Part of love, I think, is letting our time be defined by someone else. But the question always comes back to, what does that other person need? I have an assignment for you this week. Always a good thing to have an assignment. Just what you've hoped for, another assignment in your life. I see Tony back there. Tony's like, I've gone back to work. I've got all these things in my life, and you're going to give me an assignment. Yeah, well, you don't have to do the assignment, My assignment is for you to look back on your life, to get a journal or a piece of paper or type it on your computer, look back in your life, and remember the places in your story when you knew you were loved. Because the way you love is going to be defined by those moments. I'll tell you 2 quick stories, because that's your assignment. But I'll give you 2 quick stories. One story. Good Friday, 1988. So it was a long time ago. Some of you weren't even born. I was married to someone other than Linda. And I'm not an easy person to be married to. You can ask Linda. Don't ask her too much. But, it's hard. And she decided it was over on Good Friday of all days. That's a really rough day to decide. And I called my friend Harry. And we were in Charlottesville at the time. And Harry came over, and we went for a long walk on the grounds. And in that moment, I knew what love was. Because Harry just listened to me. And he patted me on the back a couple of times. And we stopped and sat for a few moments and looked at the stars. If you've never been on the grounds, UVA at night, beautiful. But I made it through that first night because Harry took a walk with me. And so when I need a touch point for love in my life, I go to that moment. Story number 2. I can think of 4 stories, but I'm not telling. Now I'm thinking of 10, but I'm not going there. Second story. I was working on this ethics paper when I was at Wesley Theological Seminary about the ethics of third world debt. If you want to read it, it's a 70-page document somewhere in my house, my copy of it. In any case, I was working, and I had been working for a long period of time with this partner, and in figuring this all out. And she and I were sitting together in a classroom at Wesley Theological Seminary. And she asked the question, you've heard the question before, so what kind of a relationship do we have? Where are we in this relationship? And I said, I value our relationship. And she said, boy, that is the biggest cop-out ever, James Edward Henry. And I said, I think our relationship's important. Well, out of that grew this long conversation when I talked through all of the dark years. This was my late 20s. I talked through all the dark years of my teenage years, which were filled with pain and brokenness and emptiness and a sense of alienation that I ultimately channeled on my first wife, which is a good reason to leave me, and that I had been through various kinds of painful, breaking things in my life, and I didn't think people would be willing to hang out with me. And Linda Denise Patterson said to me, I love you, James. And, or something to that effect. And then, I let you in too deep, so I had to push you back out. When you tell love stories on the, something like that. I don't know what the exact words were. It was something like, I love you, James. That's what I heard. And then I heard something else. And I heard it more, not in her words, but in her actions. She didn't leave. And the next day I saw her at school, and she was still there. And the next week I saw her in school, and she was still there. And the next month I saw her in school, and she was still there. And 4 months later, I saw her at my house because she was married to me. And 23 and a half years later, she's still here. And that's a piece of love story for me. Now, that's a romantic kind of love, but I needed someone to just accept me where I was, to just love me where I was, and to realize I was a deeply broken person. And it was okay. And I knew God thought it was okay. At least I thought in the back of my mind. But Linda thought it was okay. And because Linda thought it was okay, she hung with me. And, then there are other love pieces since then. But those stories are touchstone places I go. So when somebody sits in my office and tells me a story that they think might shock me, or sits in Starbucks more likely and tells me a story they think might shock me, I accept that story just the way that it is. I hear that story, I accept that story, and oftentimes I affirm that God loves them right where they are. And so do I. And I can do that because I've experienced that. So I need you to journal about where you've experienced love, because until you've experienced it and touched that in your life and know where it comes from, can you give it away to somebody else? That's when you can give away love, is where when you have a sense of where it comes from. Sometimes you just do it naturally. I know some of you just super loving people. But figure out where that love comes from deep inside yourself. Why do you think that my core value, my mission, is to share the absolute acceptance and unconditional love of God with others? It's because that absolute acceptance and unconditional love is what I've experienced that changed my life. Where have you experienced that? And how can you share that? Journal about it this week. Write about it. Think about it. Write it down in front of you where you can see it and then think, no, that's not it. Cross it out. Write some new ones. And think about it all week long. I'm not going to make you report next week. There's no report you have to turn in. But let love become the fruit you bear every day by celebrating the love you've already experienced. And if you can't figure out a spot where you've experienced love, make an appointment to come and talk to me. Because I want to help you on that journey to figure that out.